Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Sometimes, John, the league has changed so much, and we've seen defensive coaches, Belichick, Pete Carroll, really look outdated. The Pittsburgh Steelers, now, we have to have this conversation about Mike Tomlin pretty early this year. Russell Wilson had 5 series, 1 first down. They can't get the snap right with Justin Fields. This offensive line, still a mess, doesn't get a great push. Now, we can keep blaming Russell Wilson, but if you go back to last year, let's be fair. Once Hackett left and Peyton took over, Russell wasn't the primary issue last year. Limited, yes, the defense was egregiously bad. I look at Pittsburgh right now, and they have too many good players to be pathetic offensively. And, I mean, Russell Wilson's been in this league a long time. He can't pick up first downs. First downs. When does the Mike Tomlin, I mean, everybody likes him. It's like Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's got Super Bowls too. Mike's got him. But when I watch that team, I'm like, they just feel like tone deaf offensively.
Yeah, to me, I thought it was time for a divorce last year. You know, Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles got a divorce. How'd that work out for both? Super Bowl for the Eagles. Andy's won 3. Everyone benefited.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like anyone's ever on the hot seat in Pittsburgh. I'm out. I'm out this year. I think this is the year that it finally kind of comes to roost and they don't go over 500. That the offensive line was getting smoked. Russell's a shell of what he used to be. You know, a guy that's lost his confidence. Fields kind of is what he is. I mean, it's carbon copy of what we saw last year. The moment Big Ben started falling off a cliff, and listen, they got lucky's the wrong word because they drafted him and he became a star. And physically at the end, it was ugly, and he was not the same guy. Obviously, threw out his arm. They drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. That's embarrassing. Like, to me, this isn't embarrassing what they're doing. They got Russell for $1 million and traded nothing for Justin Fields. It's kind of desperate. It's cheap. The Kenny Pickett in the first round. I don't know if you had a chance. I don't blame you if you did not watch any of that Eagles-Patriot preseason game Thursday night.
I watched a little.
He's not very good.
Yeah.
And even if he is a quote-unquote NFL player, he's the type of guy you draft historically in like the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah.
Same building. You always talk about this, Pittsburgh. They feel some loyalty there. It kind of gets weird. He wasn't even remotely close to a first-round talent in the history of the league. Obviously, we got a little quarterback inflation, but they've had a quarterback issue for the last 4 or 5 years. And this year, I think it's going to be worse than last year, even though these guys are more talented, because how polarizing are these two individuals? I mean, Russell's one of the biggest stars the last 15 years. He's become a lightning rod. And Fields has this like cult-like following. And I'm the one saying you should throw him in because at least he can run around. And he did that yesterday, but you can't depend. I mean, how many games last year did they win? Because like TJ Watt got a sack fumble touchdown, or, you know, the weird shit happens. They play in a ton of close games. I think this is the year that it just doesn't work. Now, for them, that's not 3 or 4 wins, but 7, 8 wins in Pittsburgh feels like a disaster, does it not?
Yeah, well, Tomlin signed an extension. I'm just saying that if Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, and Pete Carroll can be let go, that and I don't think Pittsburgh will. But we've got to be honest about this. There is some, I've been on this for like 4 years. If you go to the best offensive lines in football and the worst, the bottom is overwhelmingly defensive coaches. Now, the Giants is a drafting issue. So Daboll gets a pass there. But there is something about offensive coaches and the ability to remake, reboot, and develop offensive lines. When's the last bad Packer offensive line? They've had offensive coaches. I mean, New England right now, atrocious offensive line. See, I think one of the reasons Pete Carroll got axed is they just felt the talent was better than the production. But I watch Pittsburgh right now, and there are things, I've always said Tomlin reminds me a little of Pete Carroll. He's a pro. He's got trophies. He'd get a job in, if Pete was 15 years younger, he'd get another job.
Oh, he would have been hired last cycle.
Yeah. Also, Tomlin is the greatest lock to be a great broadcaster. I think Fox would not hire him to 15 minutes. Fox would hire him.
He'd get a lot of money in the open market as a coach. Yes. Someone would pay him $15 million. The Eagles, if they had he'd be interviewing for the top jobs.
But I do think the culture in Pittsburgh, to me, feels outdated. All their money's on the defensive side. They can't develop an offensive line. They still draft and develop at wide receiver, pass rusher, defensive line, linebacker at a very elite level. Free agency, they're not biggest spenders, but they'll go out and make a deal. I kind of just feel like when I watch Pittsburgh, I'm like, this just feels broken. It's not,
well, they don't know. They don't know
England.
quarterbacks. They don't know quarterbacks.
Well, New England is not only broken, they have a talent scarcity. Pittsburgh's got players. I'll argue that all day long. They've got players.
I mean, they have one of the best players in the league. Minkah Fitzpatrick's a stud. They got a quarterback problem, and they don't know how to identify it. Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. I mean, they were playing games with Duck Hodges 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dating a country star selling real estate now. These two guys, this has got debacle written all over it. And listen, to me, Tomlin, sometimes you just need a fresh start. He's also being let down by, like, the front office is drafting these players too, and they just had a front office turnover. Kevin Colbert, who is a scout, I would say is pretty good at his job, and they kind of pivoted to kind of this modern day, the cap guy. It's not going to work. Now, one thing they got going for him, Burrow's health is a major concern.
Yeah.
He struggles to practice 4 straight days. I think he has to take the 4th day. The Cleveland Browns, while their roster is excellent and Kevin Stefanski is a good offensive coach, their quarterback situation could be a debacle as well, right? Deshaun Watson has not been good. And the Ravens, are they going to be as good as they were last year? You lose Mike McDonald, you lose some players in free agency, but they're still good. But you just factor in the other 2 teams. They have pretty big question marks at quarterback, one being health and one being Deshaun Watson might be the most overpaid player in the history of the league.
Hey, football fans, if you're looking to dominate your fantasy league next year, then we've got the channel for you. From the NFL Draft through training camp in Week 1 to Super Bowl Sunday, Fantasy Pros is the home of football content you cannot afford to miss. Subscribe today, and your team will be in championship form in no time.
If I had a take, and I know, I've used this example before, John, and you as a scout probably know this better than anybody. I've talked about before, Seahawk camp was in Cheney, Washington, where I went to college. And I've talked about before seeing Eugene Robinson from Colgate, his first practice with the Seahawks, and literally knowing, I had people around me and I could name them. I went to college with them saying, holy shit, he is lighting up Steve Largent. Who is that Colgate? Who at that time, I don't even know if I'd ever seen an Ivy League game on TV. This is back in like 1982. It doesn't take long to see certain things, right? Here's a take. Bo Nix is got a better arm than I think people think. I think he's more cut and athletic than people think. I noticed this when I saw him live on the field against Utah. That game, everything went Oregon's way. And I know it's preseason, John, but I've watched Bo Nix and I'm like, oh shit. Caleb, defensive coach. Drake May, defensive coach. Jaden, defensive coach. J.J. McCarthy hurt. Penix may not play. Hot take. Bo Nix is the best quarterback this year out of the crop.
I think Caleb will be better because of what he's dealing with, but I think Bo Nix is going to shut a lot of people up really fast. It's already inevitable. He's a starter for Week 1. He's got a coach, I would say, a well-established, very rich guy who's already won a Super Bowl, who kind of has this like back against the wall chip on his shoulder right now.
Yeah.
Because that year last year was probably not fun. And is anything, I would say nothing has a chance to age better faster than booting Russell out for $80 million and selecting this guy. And let's face it, leading up to the draft before he inevitably picked him, everyone was going, oh, Sean Payton wants Bo Nix. That's terrible. That's awful. You can't draft this guy that high. This is crazy. This is stupid. And it's like, no, this guy has a pretty good idea. He was one of the rare guys that was all in on Mahomes. He, like Drew Brees, once upon a time when not everyone was lining at the door. So I would say that you have an offensive coach is just a huge advantage, and a guy that can develop quarterbacks and a guy who can call the plays. To me, my biggest thing is not offensive and defensive coaches. It's, do you call the plays? Do you dictate 50% of the game? And obviously, as an offensive coach, not only are you calling the plays, you're controlling the quarterback then essentially and the pace of the game. defense is much more physicality. There's stuff out of your control. Even great defense gets beat sometime. But as an offensive play caller, you can completely control the game. And beside that couple-year stretch, which was bad, I think Rob Ryan was their defensive coordinator in New Orleans, and they were going 7-9, even though their offense was setting records. When they've had good defenses, they dominated. They were consistent 10 to 12 win team in the NFL. That's what Sean Payton's record is when the defense is solid. So if their defense is solid, which it was the second half of last year, and clearly, I think removing Russell Wilson, and this is why I'm out on the Steelers, that thing that you take in is more than just that missed third down throw. It's all this other stuff, which in fairness, I don't know how much Russell brings it. It's just there now. It's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
And you remove that, you get this young, hungry guy, you get this chip on the shoulder coach. The Raiders naming Gardner Minshew, that they're not going to be any good. The Chargers just going to have some injury problems, and their depth is going to be very questionable.
Yeah.
Is it crazy to think Denver could finish second in this division?
No.
He clearly likes this team. They like their rookie class. They got some good wide receivers watching them play. I mean, I don't think it's inconceivable they go 9-8.
Bo Nix played with Troy Franklin. Troy averaged 105 yards per game, 14 touchdowns. Shit, they played together in college. Like, think about this. He's 24. Drake May's 21. Offensive coach. I think between Mims, Cortland Sutton, and Troy Franklin, they have a good tight end, two capable backs. I'm like, that's at least average to slightly above average. I mean, look at Dallas Cowboys. They're completely dependent on CeeDee Lamb staying healthy or they're screwed. Yeah. So to me, I look at Denver and I'm like, every single year, it was Houston last year, there's a pop team. And I'm watching Bo Nix, and I've had a couple of texts with Sean Payton. It's not lost on me that a former NFL quarterback that I was talking to in the building at Fox several months ago said, just remember, Drake, Caleb, and Jaden have defensive coaches. He goes, I don't care how talented they are. And this guy came into the league years ago and had a defensive coach. He said, it matters. Like, you're nervous. He said a defensive coach. I mean, Mark Sanchez told me years and years ago, it's like, the reality is an offensive coach, you talk at night, you text, you're texting. Defensive coaches think differently. Their buddies are defensive coaches. Their favorite players, or Belichick's favorite player is Lawrence Taylor. It's not Tom Brady. Yeah. So I think, I just think Denver's better. PFF has their personnel near the bottom of the league. And I'm like,
Well, why'd Peyton Manning love Adam Gase? Because he could text him at 1 o'clock in the morning and he'd text him right back and they'd be talking football. These offensive guys, I saw with Andy Reid, sleeps like 3 hours a night. He's just in the whiteboard. Just doing these guys. It's like a creative. The mentality it's night and day different. Now, some of the defensive guys are just such natural leaders. The aggressiveness it's a different personality. But yeah, I mean, I think the offensive play caller is number one guy you'd ever want running, especially in this modern day football. But who are the options for pop teams, right? It'd have to be a team, an AFC West team, right? Not the Chiefs. So it'd be the Raiders, the Chargers, or the Broncos. I think most people are out on the Raiders when you watch their quarterback situation. Listen, I'm a Jim Harbaugh diehard, but they just got a ton of injuries. They got guys that have always injured. That makes me nervous. Their quarterback just got out of a boot. The Jets, who we talked about, I would say are pretty are walking a very, very tight line. They could shatter in front of our eyes immediately. The Steelers, I got coming back to earth. They were already a playoff team. Same with the Cleveland Browns, because their quarterback situation just scares the crap out of me. I think it's wide open for a team like the Broncos to kind of sneak up on people for sure.